Hello, Michael.
How are you?
I have no complaints. It's a beautiful day. The windows are open. The air conditioning's not on. What more could I ask for in life?
Yeah, I've just got I don't have as nice an office as you. I'm sitting in our other room, and I'm trying to figure out more video effects and settings. There we are. Show them all. Come on, you can do this. Good.
So I'm in my daughter's former bedroom, which has a south window and a west window. So where more could you want to be in life?
I've got a southeast facing view from the 23rd floor of Moan Condominium, looking out over beautiful Lake Ontario. There are sailboats that are out there right now practicing, and just exciting. I'm right next to Quayside, if you know a little bit about where that is.
Yep. Yeah. Well, anything after the 20th floor is quite a spectacular view, I must say.
Yeah,
I spent
and also
time climbing those buildings down in the. When I was younger, I would climb buildings that were under construction just to get a sense of the view and stuff. I owned a hard hat, right? So I'd put on work boots and a hard hat, and I just go onto the site, and someone would figure out. I actually did that for the Sky Dome. I was there for, I went on with my hard hat and stuff for Sky Dome, and I joined all the construction workers watching the preparations for the opening program, and I wandered into the underground parking. Oh, it was a grand time. I have a white hard hat, and that makes me look like an inspector, right? So nobody gives me a hard time.
Yeah, just add a clipboard, and that way you go. So it's, this is quite something, because I've got and I keep telling Waterfront Toronto that I've got a commanding view of Villiers Island and all the other things that they're doing. So it's I'll be keeping a close eye on them. But it's fascinating stuff. Fascinating.
Yeah. I know if things had gone another way, I certainly would have wanted to get that view at some point in time. But I don't live in anything I don't build when I go to apartments. So I have to wait for something to come along.
Yeah. Just some nuts and bolts. You have your own PowerPoint?
I do, but I'm not expecting to use it.
Okay.
But now you mention it, I will make it available. It's just that I found using the PowerPoint gets people focused on details rather than the message.
Okay.
And we're really trying to get people to understand the big picture, because the details can follow for people who love details. But the big picture is Toronto's lost, and until it figures things out, we are stuck with a worsening problem that they're doing nothing to make better.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and so that to me can be, and actually, my plan is to do a fairly complete introduction, then to answer the questions, then to talk about the model.
Okay.
And somebody came up with a wonderful question about the housing continuum, which is my big bugaboo. Alan, I think it was.
Yeah. We have that as our banner. And I'm just going to share the screen to make sure that we've got this slideshow. And come on, slideshow, you can do it. There you go. and from the beginning. So this is how we go. So I'm going to start off with this. It'll take about 5-6 minutes, and this will be the screen that we've got. Once we get everything, we'll go through a little bit of the meeting protocol. We're going to have our Indigenous land acknowledgement, a little bit of an introduction to FoSTRA and the resident association members, and then your presentation with a Q&A. However you want to run that, I can, just flag me on that. We've got, I think, 6 questions. There are 25 people registered so far. I had about 120 people, and that's why I like working with teams on webinars, because they have all the data. So we had about 125 people that were looking at it. So these are the ward boundaries. We're going to have to get a new graphic because these are all going to change. And then some of the initiatives that we've got, I'm just going to go through. Number 4, affordable housing, and that's how we're going to be proceeding. And then comes this slide. I'm going to have Don Young, who is the director for Ward 11. He will be reading the Indigenous message and also introducing you. Okay.
Okay.
And then
he's got a good question in the questions.
Yes. They're Don, Allen, myself, Liz McGroarty, and Lynn-Ann Mulrooney. Lynn-Ann's not going to be with. She's not feeling well, but we're all part of the Homes for All initiative. So right after that last slide with your handsome face on it, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and I'll turn it over to you. And then there's the thank you, and we go like that. So stop sharing. And
here's Don.
Here he is.
So there's more questions than you had in the PowerPoint in the Excel that you sent to me. And so I am happy to go through all of the questions first if you'd like, after I've done my own introduction, simply because since I'm working in general, the questions allow me to speak in general to the questions, and then I'll just fill in my presentation from there.
Okay. And we can take the pre-registered questions, and then we'll open it up to the floor. So we'll maybe have three or four questions. What's your timing for the presentation? I think about half hour.
I think my sense is I can do it in 15 to 20 minutes.
Fast talker. I like a fast talker.
Yeah, the last time I did it which was 2 weekends ago. I did some version of this for the Scarborough Business Association's housing summit out in Scarborough.
Oh, cool.
And it took me 20 minutes to do the presentation. I was supposed to be there from 4 to 4:45, and the questions ended at 7 o'clock.
We might, I mean, this is an exciting group that we've got here.
And I go to bed at 10:30, so you better warn them.
Okay. Yeah, it's not just being home before the lights go on, it's actually being in bed.
Well, I'm home. I'm 30 seconds from my bed. I'll just go get my floss, and I'll floss while I answer questions. Okay.
All right. Okay, I think we're good. And so we'll see people coming in. Who have we got here? And all right, so Don is here. And Suzanne Kavanaugh is here. Suzanne's great. She's going to, she'll have some good questions for you.
I have zero fear of good questions. I have zero fear of hard questions, you know. if you're going to spend 45 years putting something together, you better know what it is.
Oh, yeah. Just reviewing your bio with Don earlier, and the things that you have gotten involved in, and it seems like only yesterday that you were graduating from the university. All of a sudden, 45 years later, boom.
No, it's true. It's gone fairly fast, and the trajectory has had relatively few bumps in it. And every bump that sort of redirected me in a better direction. So I'm not complaining about how I've been guided through this process.
Yeah. I was a former elementary and secondary school administrator for the Toronto Catholic Board. And I always told my kids, I don't always call them my kids, but I always told them that, education is not a straight path. It will take you here, there, and everywhere. And, if you, what was the thing I always used? It's where you stumble that you find the gold.
Yeah. No, if you're careful, that's true. Yep. I did what I now call a master's in world studies when I graduated from Waterloo. And that involved a backpack, 8 months, completely around the world, including a bus from Athens to India, and all for the cost of under $4,000.
All right.
In 1975, nobody was shooting at each other in Iran or Turkey or in Afghanistan. They were all peaceful places looking for tourists to take money from. So it was a wonderful, it's wonderful to do something you can't do over again,
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to start with our PowerPoint and get things going here. We're going to have people are starting to come in a little bit more. And so
they've heard the land acknowledgement before, so what the heck?
Where did we go? In the window. Which window? There we go. So I'm just going to welcome everybody that's now coming in, and we'll have a few minutes before we actually get things started.
Oh, he's made you the controller of the mics.
Okay. There we go. So we're just going to be starting the meeting in a few minutes as more people join us. And this is a good time to go and get that cup of tea or glass of water.
Oh, yes, that's a good idea.
Okay, and if I close that, is everybody going to go? And we're just going to give it a few more minutes as people are coming in so they get the benefit of the entire presentation. All right, and we welcome everybody that's joining us, and I'm going to give it one more minute, and then we can get started at 7:05. And now is that time when I make sure that my cell phone is off. There we go.
I've got one of those watches that tells you if your cell phone is ringing, so I haven't turned my cell phone on in months. So my wrist buzzes when it's time to look for the cell phone.
And just a couple more seconds and we'll get going. And right now I've started the recording for record keeping purposes. And I'd like to welcome everyone to our presentation. Our theme is Housing for All, and we thank all of the members of FoSTRA and anyone, new friends who have taken the time to attend this presentation. And we plan on bringing you more educational experiences such as this over the course of the year. Just a few housekeeping tips before we begin. First, for purposes of our minute taker, we are recording the presentation. A link to the minutes, the complete webinar slide deck, and other valuable links will be available shortly after the webinar. Now, let's take a look at our team's protocols. Our meeting starts with your microphone muted and your camera off. Please note the icons on the graphic at the bottom of your screen. The microphone control will allow you to click and mute or unmute your microphone when directed. Camera control, by clicking on the icon, will start or stop your camera when directed. Clicking on the chat icon will allow you to write a question or comment, and we will accept questions or comments via the chat feature. Clicking on the reactions icon will allow you to provide a quick comment. And so here is the agenda for this evening, and we're going to be starting off. My name is Michael Bethke, and I'll be the chair for this evening. Many hands go into the development of this presentation and now work behind the scenes to bring this to you. I wish to thank Don Young for his on-screen work tonight and Alan Bartel for handling the questions for Michael Labbé. Our agenda is on screen, and as you can see, we'll start off with the Indigenous Land Acknowledgement, and I would ask Don Young, Director for Ward 11, to read the Indigenous Land Acknowledgement. Don? And we'll give Don his microphone. the camera. Ooh, having a bit of a technical. Okay, Don, can you unmute your mic?
Yep, here I go.
Oh, there you go.
All right, thank you. Okay, so FoSTRA acknowledges that South Toronto has been the site of human activity for at least 15,000 years. It is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples. We acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13, signed with the Mississaugas of the Credit, and the Williams Treaty, signed with multiple Mississauga and Chippewa bands. Today, Takaranto continues to be home to many Indigenous people from across Turtle Island. We are grateful for the opportunity to live and work on this territory. We are also mindful of broken covenants and the need to strive to make things right. As a treaty people, we commit to listen, to learn, and to work towards justice and reconciliation.
Thank you, Don. And I'm going to just start this portion of our webinar with a brief overview of FoSTRA. On the screen, you can see that we cover the wards 4, 9, 10, 11, and 13. And we have 27 different resident associations from those wards. Our initiatives are 4 in number, looking at intensification, infrastructure, environment, and affordable housing. All of these point to local planning and community consultation as our prime raison d'etre. And this presentation is coming to you through the affordable housing group. What I'd like to do is now introduce Michael Labbé, and I would ask Don to read his bio that we have for this meeting. Don?
Okay. Michael Labbé, Mike to many, is an urban and regional planning graduate from the University of Waterloo. He has been involved in the production of affordable housing for 37 years, the first 13 working on subsidized rental projects and housing co-ops with Lantana Nonprofit Housing Corporation. A trip to work in the township of Johannesburg, South Africa, and the disappearance of government programs and grants contributed to a shift in focus to affordable ownership housing. In 1992, Mike founded Options for Homes Nonprofit Corporation. As president of Options, Mike was instrumental in developing a model that can provide mixed income housing to thousands of households without any permanent government subsidy. Options for Homes has become a leading organization in the social enterprise movement and has provided homes to over 6,500 households across Canada. Mike has implemented the Options housing model in 6 countries across the world so far. Mike and Options have received numerous awards and honors over the years. Options has been recognized by CMHC as the winner of a CMHC Housing Award in 2002, as an Ernest C. Manning Innovation Award nominee in 2014, a Tarian Award of Excellence finalist in the High Rise Builder category in 2011, as part of the Tide's Top 10 Social Enterprises for 2007. Recognition for Mike's work continued as a City of Toronto Housing Affordable Housing Champion in 2010, and as a Schwab Foundation Social Entrepreneur of the Year finalist in 2007, winner of the Canadian Urban Institute Local Hero Award in 2008, and is a recipient of the Meritorious Service Medal from the Governor General of Canada in 2016. Options began expanding its business model to other social enterprises in 2009 through Options for Homes International and its Sustainable Development Division. Community Wealth Cooperative Corporation now supports these activities. This cooperative nonprofit social enterprise acts as a source of venture capital for the social enterprise community. At present, Mike is looking forward to deepening his involvement in addressing poverty through jobs created by housing development and protecting the planet through social enterprises, both internationally and in Canada, as President and CEO of Home Opportunities Nonprofit Corporation. Mike.
Shall I just start? Yes, okay.
So I think, I think what we'll do is we have a very different approach to the presentation tonight, and I'm just going to ask Mike if he would explain. We're going to have a different order of things happening. Mike?
Yes, I was going to do an introduction. I still will, because there were things that are worth mentioning related to your area of operation to help people understand some more of my background. And I'm not going to use a PowerPoint unless I have to, because people want to get into detail. I think the detail is not so important as the broader overall view, especially from your perspective. I'm also going to be letting you know from upfront that what we're doing these presentations for is to create more and more advocates out there, because there's no use developing a housing solution and then sitting on it. If you don't share it and those people don't pass it on as something worth people considering, then it just languishes. So I was going to start by answering the questions, but there are more questions that came in after I got my list of questions. So I'm going to leave the questions to the end, although I may be addressing some of them as I go through my presentation. I've become more comfortable just talking about what we're doing and trying to do than using a PowerPoint, because I've found people get so locked into the details, they miss the bigger picture, and the bigger picture is more important than the details. So the first thing I want to do is catch you up on some stuff. I hadn't realized how old that particular introduction was, so I may pay more attention to what I send to people. I actually grew up in Northern Ontario, in a small town called Sturgeon Falls. That is extremely relevant in terms of my experiences, because the community that you get in a small town can be replicated in a big city if you pay attention to actually doing it. And so many of the options buildings, including the ones with 643 units, which means 1,500 to 2,000 people, are known as the buildings where people talk to each other in the elevators because everybody knows each other. And we have been making a practice of meeting with the purchasers of our buildings ahead of time every 6 weeks before the building is finished, so they meet each other. So we add community to the buildings that we're doing. The second thing is, and I noticed some questions, and I'll be happy to get to those questions about the cooperative movement in terms of your questions around housing and the housing cooperative movement, et cetera. But I actually started, I came to Toronto in 1976. As one or two of you heard about bragging about the trip I did around the world for $4,000. My master's in world studies, I call it. So I came to the city in 76, and the first thing I did was participate in moving the food co-op from Neil Wyzett Co-op to 519 Church Street. That was the first involvement that I had in the cooperative movement inside of Toronto, which led me to starting food co-ops in housing cooperatives, which led me to housing cooperatives, which led me to Lantana Nonprofit Homes and the Windmill Line Cooperative and the Caroline Cooperative, multiple projects within this area, including working with Homes First, including working with several of the nonprofits. So I was fully embedded in subsidized housing until the government shut off the tap. Options for Homes was a reaction to that. As one of the questions asked, so now here's the answer, it is fully derived from something called building cooperatives that happened in the 1950s and 60s, where people were expected, get this, to provide 30 hours of volunteer time a week while they built their own homes. At the end of the day, they owned those homes for themselves. So that's no longer possible for a whole ton of reasons. So what we did is we adapted that model for Options for Homes, and they formed cooperative housing corporations composed of future owners of condominiums, and they hired us to build condominiums for them. And thus the first 3 buildings in the Distillery District were constructed using the options for homes model. As we travel forward with that model, the interesting thing about the early days of the model was that it was generating housing that carried for the average rent level in Toronto without any grants and subsidies, which was a complete eye-opener to me, who'd been happily spending government subsidies throughout the 1980s. But it is 25% less expensive to build and operate ownership housing than rental. And so that's the most important thing that I learned, is why are we spending money on the most expensive solution? Why wouldn't we spend it on the least expensive solution, especially given that anybody in their right mind would rather be an owner than a tenant? And so people say to me, and I'm going to ramble a bit here as I go through the introduction, people say to me, well, we need rental because people want to rent. And I haven't found that person who wants to rent if they're going to rent for $1,400 but own a home for $1,450. Every single person I talk to will pay the extra $50 to own that home. And so it's a fallacy to think that we need rental. In fact, Toronto has too much rental. So I'll leave the further comments around that to questions that people might ask. But what happened with options for homes is we were basically taking the profits of development as a nonprofit system, lending them people to help them with their down payments, getting them qualified without CMHC, and making homes more affordable. As the prices and cost of construction went up, we started serving higher and higher incomes, which is why Home Opportunities was created. Home Opportunities is a model that can deliver ownership opportunities in Toronto to people whose income is below the income that currently qualifies for affordable rental. So we can reach lower incomes in the affordable rental program. Those are roughly between $35,000 and $95,000 a year, depending on the size of unit, for 30% of the units. And then we have 30% of the units that go to affordable ownership, which is 20% higher, and then to anybody who wants to buy, because blended income communities are the most effective types of communities to produce. So that's where Home Opportunities has gotten. That is really where the beginning of my presentation is. So what I want to talk to you about today, pending going into the questions, is a comprehensive solution to our current housing problem. So first and foremost, does anybody here, and I'm not going to ask you to answer, I'm going to ask and then answer it myself, know how many units a year Toronto needs to solve its housing problem? Now, you'll never see that written into a report because based on my knowledge and information, it's probably 25,000 units a year of affordable housing. At the end of the 1990s, before government funding disappeared, the target was 10,000 units a year to address the need in Toronto. We haven't done that for 30 years, so we're 300,000 behind. So it seems to me that 25,000 a year is the only way we can catch up. Those of you who have been studying the matters of the city, because they refuse to work with ownership, only want to work with rental, they only have enough subsidies to do 3,000 or 4,000 units a year. So every year we're falling further and further behind. So if we're going to solve the housing problem, if we're going to produce the 25,000 units a year, and I'll mention that government controls 150,000 units worth of land within the city of Toronto. So it's not that we don't have the land, it's that we don't have the capacity to focus. But in any event, if we're going to produce 25,000 units a year, it has to be done without using grants and subsidies. If we're not going to use grants and subsidies, the only format that does that is ownership. So what we're talking to you today about is home ownership exclusively, but home ownership targeted to allow anybody earning a minimum wage and up in a steady job to be able to own a home. So that's the critical piece, is the first step in the puzzle is home ownership, because you can do it without grants and subsidies, and you do it through lending programs rather than grant and subsidy programs. The second piece of the puzzle, as we know today in Toronto, is what you produce, you have to be able to sell. As you know, most sales offices have shut because they can't pre-sell the units at a price that works in the current financial environment because of the interest rates. Because we have up to 50% of the value of a home being lent to people to be paid back when they sell, you're carrying a mortgage for half the cost of your home. Therefore, we can reach the lower incomes. The 60% of our units go to incomes between $35,000 and $115,000. There's an infinite number of buyers in Toronto for that product. So we've solved the second problem, which is we can sell whatever we build. Because there's no grants and subsidies, we can do 1,000 units at a time. We are not going to solve the housing problem in Toronto 100 or 150 units at a time. We can do smaller projects, which was one of the questions, but we prefer to do the big ones because redeveloping the large projects take as much work as developing the small projects. So that's the second piece. Now there's a third piece that people talk about, but they don't have an easy solution to, is that we don't have enough tradesmen to double the capacity of housing production in Toronto, which is what we need to do to get 25,000 units a year, because we can't train trades fast enough to grow the numbers given how much retirement is happening. So the last piece of the puzzle is that you have to build 50% of the housing you plan to produce in factories. Factory jobs on assembly lines are easy to train into than on-site construction workers. So the minute you put 50% of the capacity into factories, you double the capacity to build. So with those three pieces, you can now plan to do 25,000 units a year, 4,000 subsidized rental, 21,000 affordable ownership. Now, if we take 20,000 people a year out of rental units, before you know it, there'll be a 3 to 4% vacancy rate, and many of the problems with rental will start to diminish. So we have a secondary beneficial impact on rental, but primarily we're focused on ownership and building ownership housing. Now, there was one last thing I will put out there for people to consider, is this issue that we want the housing to be permanently affordable. Well, permanently affordable means subsidies and grants. Subsidies and grants mean 3,000 to 4,000 units a year. Permanently affordable means the problem will be permanent. For the entire future of the city of Toronto, there will never be a housing solution. If we're building 25,000 units a year, which is the need that is there for housing, and we continue to do that over 10, 15, 20 years, it doesn't matter how long it lasts because we're satisfying the need every year. So by allowing housing to trade into the marketplace, freeing up money to help someone else on another site, we solve the problem. By locking the money in place and effectively burying it in the foundations of the building, we create a permanent problem that will never be addressed. Now, how bad are things getting out there? I'll give you one piece of information that I think tells everything. The Toronto Community Health Network, the University Health Network, the hospitals, Toronto General and the hospitals on University Avenue, they are losing 25% of their nurses every 2 years because of the lack of affordable housing. How do you run an institution when 25% of your staff is leaving every 2 years? The rot that is happening to the city of Toronto because it's not building the number of units it has to build to solve the problem is only going to make this city less and less livable, increase the tension and violence that's going on, not only in our streets, but in our schools. So this is a serious issue that deserves attention and deserves an appropriate solution, rather than simply doing what we've done in the past and hoping somehow that the private sector will rescue us. I should mention, I don't want to be derogatory on the private sector, but its job is to make profits. Its job is not to solve the affordable housing problem. Our job as nonprofit agencies is to solve the affordable housing problem. So we work with contractors who agree to a 10% margin. We work with real estate agents who agree to $1,000 per sale. We control the profit motivation such that we end up with affordability without hurting companies themselves. So it's a question of, you've heard it said many times, that it's an all hands on deck problem. We have to get everybody working towards it. Well, all hands on deck, you still need a captain. And if the captain is steering the ship towards maximizing profits on the backs of purchasers, you get one result. If the captain is directing towards affordable housing because they're a nonprofit entity and that's all they care about, you get a different solution to the problem. So you need a nonprofit guided process that incorporates the strengths of the private sector. It is worth mentioning that in the 1980s, all RFPs by the City of Toronto were only to and exclusively to nonprofit delivery agencies. 95% of those RFPs were successful and projects were built. RFPs currently are out to $100 billion corporations because they think that's more stable. All but one of those RFPs have failed, and they're currently trying to figure out how to get them rescued, because a large profit-making company will walk away from any project that doesn't generate enough profits. And so as soon as the economy changed, everybody walked away from the deals, and there's been hundreds and thousands of hours wasted to produce virtually no units. So to me, it's quite clear, but I've been working on this for 45 years. We're sitting on a solution. I have no political resistance. The resistance is entirely from staff. And so the way we get around that is to provide them political cover so they're not taking a risk. And that's where you guys come in, is talking to your politicians and saying, I heard a presentation about home ownership being the solution. It sounds exciting. You should be paying attention and helping it along. So I promised about 20 minutes. I have no clue when I started, because I think if I haven't said enough for questions now, then the questions that come up, we'll do that. So my suggestion is that we go to the fixed questions that people sent in. I'll answer all of those. There's a really good one on the housing continuum, so I'm looking forward to that. And then after those questions, we'll go to questions that anybody wants to ask. So are we comfortable doing that, going to the questions that were sent in and then going from there? And Michael, have I missed anything you wanted me to say prior to going to that point? Right.
I think we're good. I think we're good. And I want to turn this over to Alan. And Rick has indicated that he's fine with that. Rick Amos had his hand up. So I think we're going to go to Alan Bartel, who will be giving us the questions.
Perfect.
Okay, Alan.
Okay, I'm here.
There you go.
This is the first question. The very first housing co-ops were created to build houses that the members could own. Do you consider what you are doing in keeping with this tradition?
Yeah, it is a direct continuance of that tradition. So much so that we've now created a nascent cooperative homeownership sector intended to run in parallel to the current cooperative rental sector. And it's our aspirations that that sector will be building 20,000 units a year within 10 years. And all of that money being pooled so that there's the ability to eventually work completely independent of government, still providing affordable housing. So yes, it's part of the cooperative movement. It's being structured to be embedded in the cooperative movement. It's a member of the Ontario Cooperative Association, and it's using the same techniques from the 50s, which far less volunteer requirement and modeled on how the cooperative rental sector started, which was paid professional consultants working with lay people to build their own homes.
And there's a second part to this question. What's the catch?
Well, the catch is that you have to agree that low-income people have the same right to own a home as anybody else does. Because there are people in the city who believe that low-income people haven't worked hard enough yet to deserve ownership. And so as long as you understand the benefit of home ownership to everybody, there's no catch. But there is special financing, which can be most easily achieved with municipal support. And so we have to get staff to support an application to the province to get the money that we borrow that we pay back over time. So the catch is that it has to be a team effort. It's not like the private sector where you've got $1 billion of cash to play with and you do what you want. This has to be a team effort, so everybody has to get on board and push in whatever ways they individually can. So the catch is that it's a community effort, and community efforts can be more challenging.
Okay, thank you. Another question is, any plans to build affordable housing for seniors?
So we have a project today at Ellesmere and Warden, 338 units being put on a piece of land owned by a church. It is specifically designed as a seniors development. If seniors bring the equity from their home, their monthly carrying costs will be less than $1,000, and we're providing some of the programming and food opportunities that come with a regular seniors residence. So what we've basically done is use the model to serve seniors, and those that come with equity get to keep their equity because it goes into owning a condominium that is a seniors building, but also they get the benefit of not having to pay someone else's mortgage like you do in the $4,000 to $5,000 a month retirement residences. So it's a nice way of protecting your equity for your children and grandchildren.
Okay. And the next question is financing co-ops still possible in the current political climate?
Yeah, that's interesting because, of course, today, CMHC finally announced that they might be releasing the $1.5 billion for the cooperative rental movement to help them build 6,000 or so units. So it's still possible, but the numbers are too small to be a comprehensive solution. So the answer is yes, but not enough of it.
Okay. What plans for affordable housing can you offer to intensify the use of current housing stock in downtown residential neighborhoods? Does everything you build need to be big?
It doesn't have to be super big, but it would be hard to do a project under 80 to 100 units simply because of the math involved with smaller projects. But you'd be surprised how much density is allowed in downtown Toronto. So there is no grants and subsidies, by the way, means we pay market value for land. And so the number of landowners in downtown Toronto that upon hearing that they'll get market value for their land, except they get paid when construction starts, so they have to be patient, there's more than we can handle. So bringing it downtown is perfectly acceptable. There are some very interesting sites. If there's anybody there are some co-ops in close proximity to downtown who have extra land and extra development potential. Their only choices are to go after a very small amount of rental funds that could take them years, or on the ownership side, they would not only get additional money for their co-ops to renovate, improve the energy features, do things, they'll also get neighbors that are also owners. And of course, first dibs would go to their members. And of course, if everybody moves out and moves into a new building, that's a message. But then they would have more units to rent, so you get more rental units. So yes, now we can look at most anything downtown where the owner is willing to be patient.
Okay. And another question is, I am comfortable now, but wish to hear ideas about the future. Thank you.
Well, that's interesting. That's not a clear enough question. Comfortable, I'm going to assume the following, that you're comfortable in your current accommodation, but your circumstances may change and you may need to find something else that serves you as your circumstances change. And that would be primarily related to old age, although accidents happen at any time in your life. We did 39 Parliament Street, the very first building that was a condominium that had 24-hour attendant care, by selling 14 units to people confined to wheelchairs. So our buildings can serve any group of people that has income, and everybody has income. So it's just a question of what percentage of what income we're serving, and any type of user. We can do a seniors building, we can do student housing. Just to mention, we have figured out how to do student housing where a student can own their unit for 4 years while they're at university and graduate with $24,000 of equity. So you leave school with money rather than debt. So that was the last piece of the puzzle that I needed to understand. So the same technique can be used for refugees. As long as you've got a steady job and you've got income, you can be associated with one of our projects, and when you become landed, become an owner, but until then, not yet fully an owner. So this is an enormously flexible approach. We have 10% of our units that are available on a save to own basis. Save to own means at least a minimum of $500 down, but during the construction period, you have to save $100 a month to stay qualified. Once you move in as an interim occupant in a condominium, and you stay that until you reach 5% down. So you're always quasi an owner throughout the process and building up equity, but you have to reach your 5% to get titled. So that's how flexible our model has become. And so it is fascinating that once we cross the threshold of finding financial sources that don't have to be paid back till you sell, all of the other barriers fell.
And this is the last of the submitted questions. In what ways is the housing continuum putting society's most vulnerable, the homeless, unemployed, and those dealing with severe mental health issues, first, instead of how we normally operate, where they get leftover crumbs, if there are any?
Yes, Alan, that's your question. You could have admitted it.
Yes.
So let me tell you, I really like this question because it leads me into a more expansive answer. So my opinion, and careful who you spread it around to because I'll get in trouble. People have created a housing continuum that has as many as 15 items on it. And the reason that this has happened is naturally everybody wants what they're doing to be important. So they define what they're doing as a piece of the housing spectrum. So they have a right to access money, and generally from the government, but also from other sources. Well, that is a distraction. In my opinion, the housing spectrum only has 3 components to it. And Alan, this directly answers your question. The first component is supportive housing. Supportive housing is housing that takes people off the streets, puts them into a place with staff support so they can deal with their demons, they can deal with their addictions, they become participating, effective members of society. Then in my housing spectrum, there's affordable housing. Affordable housing should be developed, if possible, without grants and subsidies. Because anytime we're using grants and subsidies to provide affordable housing, we're taking money away from supportive housing, which needs it more. So this is what I've been arguing, that our model is a comprehensive solution, because if you can do affordable housing without grants and subsidies, you can put all government dollars into where it's needed most. Then we have market housing, which should not get a single dollar from government because it takes care of itself anyway, but is still getting money from government, which means that's being taken away from supportive housing. So when you see the housing spectrum is simply 3 components, and the middle component can be done without grants and subsidies, then the middle component should be ownership. And there's no argument that the City of Toronto needs more rental. There is an argument that it needs more affordable rental, but if you can do the affordable rental as ownership for the same person, then it should be ownership that's given to them, because City of Toronto has 45% of its tenure as rental. If that was a housing solution, City of Toronto's problems would be far less than Halifax, which has 25% rental. So it could be argued that if Toronto went to 75% ownership, it would be a better city to live in. And I think there's a whole bunch of reasons that we could see that to be real. And so stopping to rely and pour all the money and effort into rental is the broader solution to allowing for the housing needs of Torontonians. Once we get below 25 or 20% rental, which is 50 years from now, we can talk about it and see if we need to somehow preserve it. But at this point in time, the goal is 25,000 units a year of affordable housing, regardless of tenure, pulling people out of rental, making it healthier, but increasing the amount and proportion of ownership in the city, which is better for the city and better for the people who get to be owners. I will tell you a quick story about this because it's so important. I was talking to a camera and saying, one of the reasons I'm so interested in providing ownership opportunities for residents of TCHC is that if you picture a single mom dealing with the rules and regulations of TCHC, going to the food bank to get food for her kids, and trying to make ends meet with 3 kids, she gets depressed. Kids blame themselves for their parents' depression. Their educational outcomes are affected. Put that same person into a home that she owns at an income that allows her to take care of her kids. The pride that comes from that ownership changes the educational outcome of the children and the health of the city as a whole. So it's really something worth fighting for and pushing for once you understand that that solution is sitting there for you to do so.
Thank you. And that's the end of the questions that I have, and I'll turn it back over to Michael. And thank you, Mike.
No worries.
Thanks, Alan. And way to go saving your own question for the very last. And that's the best one. Okay. We have questions that we can open up from the floor right now. And Mike, if that's okay, we might take a few more questions. And then if you've got some other points that you'd like to make, we can handle them afterwards. Okay?
For sure, for sure. As many questions as people have, let's get that done.
Okay, and we've got Rick Amos. Rick, I'm going to allow your microphone and allow your camera if you so choose, so you can just make sure your microphone is turned on and ask your question to Mike. Okay, Rick, are you there?
It's funny because every other mic looks on except Doug's and Alan's and Rick. But
Rick, the microphone is up on the upper right-hand corner. By the there should be by the leave button and the share microphone camera. It's grayed out. All right, let me try to turn off and allow the mic. Okay, give it a try.
oh, there you are. You should be here now, Rick. Rick, could I suggest you write your question in the chat? Does anybody else have another question while Rick writes his question in the chat? I don't mind reading a long question. But for some reason, when your mic came off and showed good, it still didn't allow you to talk. So.
I have one change to make.
Okay.
Let's try that.
Try
Rick,
again,
you want
Rick.
to try?
Oh, good.
There you go.
Oh, hooray.
Hello,
Okay.
Rick.
Hi, Mike. It's been many decades.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It
Thank
only...
you. So a bit of background. I helped build 2 artist housing co-ops back in the
okay.
in Beaver Hall.
Were you involved with 29 McCall?
Oh, yes, I'm one of the originators of 29 McCall and Lakeshore Village Artist Co-op.
I ran into your contractor last 3 weeks ago, and he still got scars. But anyways, go ahead.
Gosh, yes, I can appreciate that. A few years ago, I was involved with the Parkdale Neighborhood Land Trust, which I'm sure you're aware of.
Yep.
So they're actually having a general meeting next month. I just came back from England, and one of the things I was dealing with there was Artscape, which you might know of, is bankrupt. So I went to England to try to get some insights on what they do there. It's different. They have what's called a Section 106, which basically forces developers to create affordable housing and keep communities cohesive. But also through all of this experience, I know that it always comes down to the finance. It's always about the financial. Can you put the numbers together to make it work in an equitable way? And I've been talking to some of the co-ops, Beaver Hall, Lakeshore Village Artists Co-ops, Arcadia, because they're sitting on equity.
Yep.
And I think they should, at some point their mortgages are going to be done, and I'm going, are you going to give everybody a discount in their rent, or can you pay it forward? Because I argue with them and say, look, I spent 8 years of my life for free making artist housing co-ops, so pay it forward is my mantra. So I totally appreciate what you're talking about, because I do believe that when you have equity, you have some sort of money through home ownership, it does create a pride of ownership, etc. So can you suss out for me how that financial model on that broader scale works for you? Because you mentioned 50%, you mentioned this kind of scaling thing. People have to wait to get their investment. If somebody's an investor, they have to hang on and wait.
Yeah, I won't take out the PowerPoint yet. I'll try to explain it generally. If you're interested in how things could apply to the existing co-ops, you're going to have to talk to me offline. I will not say in public the stuff that's related to that, because it's a sensitive, complicated situation. But for us, this was designed specifically because of my frustration with the cooperative movement, where we tried to pass a policy at the CHF National Convention saying that 10% of the benefit that you were getting against market value would be paid into a pool to help other people get housing. And everybody got up at that convention and said, I volunteered, I deserve all the benefit for myself. So when I created Options for Homes, we took the position that when the co-op transfers its assets to the condominiums, because the co-ops are building condominiums, that was a dissolution point. So the profits had to be protected in perpetuity as a pay it forward system. So all of the projects we do currently are working at a 20% profit margin. So on some projects, that's $100 million, but it's divvied up between all of the purchasers. It's lent to them to help them with their down payment, but when they sell, it goes back into a pool to help the next person. So we will eventually have a pool of hundreds of millions of dollars to solve the housing problem and address poverty. So Community Wealth Co-op that holds all of that money has two mandates: to improve society and protect the planet. That's their mandate. Now, the money doesn't come quickly, but Options for Homes pool of money grew to $100 million. And I expect within 10 to 15 years, Community Wealth Co-ops will grow to $1 billion. And so that money becomes a permanently target pay it forward system. The other portion of the 30% that doesn't get paid back until you sell, that's money from the city, that's money from credit unions. It's paid back as people sell over time. It's all paid back like any other mortgage. It's just paid back when people sell. And so those are the two distinctions. One is a permanent asset to the cooperative community. The other one is specific borrowing that's paid back and doesn't really benefit the next person because that person paid it back when they sold. The households in these projects then only make 50% of the return on their house because the rest goes to the other lenders. But in that arrangement is a built-in inducement to be honest. Because if you are a single woman who moves in and then gets married and your income improves, it's to your advantage to pay off these other loans early so you control more of your house so you make more money. So the system is internally extremely efficient because it rewards honesty. And so they can even pay back that equity loan, the loan that is the 20% early, but then it helps someone else sooner. So there's a built-in incentive to pay it forward as quick as possible, because you'll make money if you pay it forward quick as possible. So it's a very fine-tuned, exciting use of the cooperative movement, the cooperative sector, that could ultimately produce billions of dollars to address housing, to support social enterprises that provide jobs for the hard to employ, and to support social enterprises that do job training and education. If you can train someone into a job, give them a job that allows them to afford a house, you have provided a solution for every able-bodied person that's currently poor. Then you have to address substance abuse and what I call demons, or mental health issues. Those are addressed through supportive housing. There are hundreds of people right now in supportive housing that have completed their return to society. They have a job, they're doing well. They can't get out because they don't have a place that they can afford. So taking those hundreds of people out of supportive housing frees up already available supportive housing for someone straight off the street. So it's a comprehensive solution that can be applied intelligently, but somebody has to tell staff, take a chance on something new, we will protect you. Otherwise, they'd rather protect their retirement than solve the housing problem.
Okay.
How's that for a long answer to a long question?
It's good. I think I'll have to talk to you offline.
Yes, some fun stuff to tell you offline. And anybody on the call who wants to be in on that can talk to Rick. But this will not be an official meeting. It will be cranberry juice and beer for you guys.
Thank you.
Okay, and I've got Chris Glover on the line, and I'm going to.
I recognize that name, but anyway.
Chris Glover is our MPP for Spadina, Fort York.
Oh, yes, of course. That's why I recognize that name.
Yeah. Hey, Michael.
Well, he didn't have any trouble getting his mic off.
Yeah, I'm on now. Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Yes, we're good.
Okay, that's good. Hey, thank you so much for doing this presentation. We've had a number of conversations over the last few years, and I am really excited about, the projects that you've been working on. I know the buildings in the distillery district that you've built. I know many of the residents there. They're very, very happy with what they've got. And you're right about this. We just need to scale up the project, the kind of project that you're proposing here. And we've got the public land to do it. And one of the places I really want to push this for is the Ontario line stations, because the plans are already in place, but the government's pushing for it to be all private for profit development rather than, the kind of, not-for-profit development that would actually create affordable housing and help us to deal with the crisis in the city. So have you had conversations with the government side, the other side of the floor from me, about the Ontario line stations, or about whether they're interested in your project?
The answer to that is yes. Politicians and political staff all love the idea.
Yeah.
It's kind of when you go down to the next level, right? It's bipartisan. Everybody would like to solve the housing problem. What is a little difficult is getting across the message that we pay market value for land. So take the Housing Now bids, right? 1/3 is affordable rental. We don't want to touch that. That's perfectly fine. The other 2/3 is market, but we pay market value for land. So there's no change in economic conditions, but you get 2/3 affordable, and they won't make the step because they believe that CMHC requires equity, which they don't if it's ownership, but they just won't make the step. And so somebody has to push, and that push should come out of Olivia's office, but Olivia's office is also just focused on rental. So if you can get Olivia out to dinner, she knows me, I'll sit down and I'll jabber at her, and I'll talk to her about the fact this city needs 25,000 units a year. Let's stop talking about 5,000, because we're falling behind every time we do that.
Yeah. Okay. I know Olivia as well. I'll have a conversation with her. I have had some conversations with the, the government side of the house, and I've heard interest in not-for-profit housing. But I don't know how deep that is in the caucus. So I'll keep working on both of those channels for you, because we got to get this done. I mean, it's an absolute travesty, and it keeps getting worse. And
there's some great, crazy good housing to be done at Front and Parliament. Crazy good housing. It could all be our version of affordability. The whole thing, right on top of the subway. Nobody would ever need to own a car ever again in their life.
Yes. No, I know.
Yeah.
I mean, we've got the models. We know how to solve the housing crisis. We've done it before. We just need the political will to do it. So I'm here to help you get that done. Anyways, again,
let me just emphasize for you, Chris, the solution has to be no grants and subsidies. And that's what people are having trouble with. And I will show up anywhere you invite me to repeat myself.
Okay, that's great. Well, I want to thank you for being here, and thank you to the, Michael and everybody from the East Waterfront community. Actually, sorry, this is FoSTRA.
FoSTRA.
From FoSTRA, yes. Okay. Michael Betka wears many hats. Anyways, thank you guys so much for organizing this event. It's great to hear from Michael Labbé, and it's great to hear, him, spreading the word, because there are solutions to the housing crisis. Okay, you guys have a wonderful night, and I'll talk to you later.
Bye, Chris.
Bye, Chris. Thank you very much. Okay, so we have lots of time left. If anyone else has a question that they would like to.
More questions, Michael.
Well, Rick is coming to my rescue here, so I'm going to have.
Okay.
Now that he knows how to get on, he wants to practice. He doesn't forget.
Wait a second. I'll switch him over to the master control.
Yeah, I've been following prefab, housing for decades, and with the new mass timber, et cetera, that coming to the fore, I truly do believe, it's like Ford. We don't make cars individually anymore unless you want to pay $2 million for a car. We make them on assembly lines, and I think that is a solution to housing. They don't have to be custom made. They can be cookie cutter, and you can change them after the fact. I do like the fact when we built Beaver Hall and Lakeshore Village Artists Co-op, you basically got a shell, interior wise. You had a kitchen and a bathroom. Everything else, you had to put your own equity into it. So it helped to keep the cost down of the project. And so, do you have any more thoughts about, just bringing that part of it online?
Yes, I have enormous numbers of thoughts about the factory production, as I call it. First and foremost, we have specifically designed planning processes and housing developments to be totally unfriendly to factory production. So every single building is different. Every single unit is changed for that particular building. So what you have to do is you have to create an order book of similar units to satisfy the factories so that they'll be able to exist. So our solution is fairly straightforward. First of all, we're working on 20,000 units across Southern Ontario. Most outside the city, because the city is unfriendly to ownership. But there's 2 projects in the city, a total of 500 units. All of those units are going to use the same unit plans. So we'll be offering thousands of units that are identical. The outsides of the buildings will be different. They will be adapted to the neighborhoods they're in, the architectural features. As soon as you start to put those kinds of orders in place, then factory production becomes economical. So we do have a 1,000-unit project in Guelph tied in partnership with a factory producer who's going to act as contractor, which is the best blend. And they've offered us $287 a square foot, everything finished. That compares to the city of Toronto, where you're now sitting at $450. So it's almost half the price of producing such a product in the city. Now, the city has other issues that produce their pricing, but my goal right now is to get back below 400 in the city, because that would work really well as well. But you have to be willing to put the same plans over and over again. You can't have an architect change a kitchen by 5 feet because they feel like it. You know, they think it works better, you know, and so we tend to use the same architect doing the same things. So you have to produce the volume of production. Again, we're not going to do that at 60, 100, 150 unit projects. So my pet project that I'd like you all to be advocating for is Lawrence Heights. Some of you may know that the first 2 phases of Regent Park provided 15 units for TCHC tenants to own, and those were the 50 richest tenants that were there. Lawrence Heights is capable, using our model, of offering 600 units to TCHC tenants to own. And the lives of those 600 people will change. And so we are looking to use the community and a cooperative like we used to in the 80s to do its own revitalization. So we currently have a cooperative composed of 5 women of color, all professional, all living in Lawrence Heights. And we're going to challenge TCHC to allow their own competent residents to do the redevelopment for their own benefit, and TCHC's, because TCHC is still going to get their replacement units. But that's how serious we are. That is a 3,000 unit project. All of those unit designs will be similar so that we can set up a factory production system in Toronto, which is also economic development. So there's a lot of answers here, but well-meaning people have to be willing to talk about it every time someone talks about housing and say there is a solution. And you've got to be willing to consider something outside the box. Oh, you guys will like this. I know you'll like this. I have a saying as to why bureaucrats ask you to think outside the box. Because as soon as you leave their box, they can't hear you any longer.
Well, I'm definitely interested in being an advocate of what you're talking about. I mean, I've been involved with housing issues for artists and then for other people for decades, and I haven't lost my feist for a fight yet.
Now, let me give you one other little piece of ammunition. Those 60 units that Artscape produced in the buildings down on Queen Street or wherever it was.
Triangle lofts, yeah.
Yep. That they control the resale on.
Yep.
There's $6 million of equity buried in that project at least. With that $6 million, Artscape would not have gone broke.
Well, I just recently talked to 2 people who live in that building, and Artscape owns 25% of the mortgage. And I'm talking to them, and I'm asking them what they're doing about their situation, and they go, nothing. We're just waiting. And I go, you're waiting? How much capital do you have invested in your property? And you're just going to sit around and wait? You know, maybe it could be some Hong Kong dollars that come in and buy that 25% portion. And then what happens to you? You know, maybe they'll buy the 75% after. Anyways, it's yeah, I know they're artists, and there's other issues that are more demanding for them, and this is on the back burner. So it's a challenge for me, and it's really something that I'm trying to focus on with Artscape, because I see hundreds of artists, not just the ones that have equity, but the ones that are renters that Artscape owns.
I'd love to do an artist project where if the artist gives me their true income, they control more of their unit.
Okay.
But that is optional, right? That's their choice, right? But it would allow more artists to get housing. And now you could start chasing land again, and there's lots of it, right? And so what happens is, you know, it adjusts to the artist's income, and, you know, everybody gets satisfied, but they're going to tell you about income they wouldn't otherwise tell you about, simply because it's better for everybody. So an arts building using our model is perfectly feasible. I would tend to recommend that 50% of the building be artists, but you can do 100% if you want. But artists have always been able to get a hold of land. It's coming up with a model that works on it. And so the only difference now is we're chasing scale, which makes it easier.
Okay, I've got to talk to you. Okay,
Yep.
thank you.
I presume everybody has my contacts. If not, I'm sure Michael can pass it on to you.
Click back
So-
on this. We'll be passing that on to everybody. Thank you.
I have a suggestion for you, Michael, if you like. Why don't we specifically ask people and go through, because there's only 16 people here. Ask people if they have anything to add, so give them permission to speak, and move your way through the group. No one has to. They can just say nothing. But giving them permission to say something often generates some interesting stuff. If it's your call.
Oh, no, I'm willing to open it up. I just wanted to ask a question myself.
Oh,
Because
sure.
yeah, Sean Fraser came out with his plan. He had a book of plans actually and it harkened me back to wartime housing. And we've seen an awful lot of that. And it is more individual, single family dwelling housing that is based on the manufactured home model. And I get what we're talking about would not work for the single family dwellings. I think we're looking at more of multi-unit dwellings with this kind of a program. Is that
That's correct, but nothing's preventing us from only having one design of a one bedroom, one design of a one bedroom and den, one design of a two bedroom, right? And using it thousands of times. But somebody has to say that has to happen, and that has to be the development entity. So we in Community Wealth will be saying that. So when you see one of our buildings in Toronto, it will be similar in dimension, but different in outside appearance. And that will happen over and over again. And the end result will be affordable housing for everybody, and yet housing that still looks very good.
Okay. And it was a comment that was made in one of our previous webinars about there should be some sort of a program that treats housing as infrastructure. That it's not just housing, that this is where we should look at it, and we should be getting everybody, and this is kind of a little bit of what I'm getting from you. We should be getting everybody with their hand on the rope on this, all levels of government, everything. And then because we do that when we're building highways, we do that when we're building, other infrastructure projects.
It's useful to know that our housing, because we're nonprofits, qualify for Infrastructure Ontario money. And so we've already established that. So all that has to happen is the City of Toronto has to partner with us, go to Infrastructure Ontario and borrow the 20% that we want to pay back as people sell. So it doesn't have to be considered infrastructure. If it's affordable, nonprofit housing, it already qualifies.
Okay. Now, is this the Provincial Infrastructure Bank that they were trying to set up, or is this through a different organization?
There is something already in place called Infrastructure Ontario that lends to infrastructure projects, including hospitals. About 8 years ago, Options for Homes got itself qualified to borrow from that source because they lend to nonprofits, they lend for public purpose, and now they qualified affordable housing as, and that's both affordable rental and affordable ownership, which was very useful. The Infrastructure Bank will also be able to lend under those conditions. And with the city coming with us to borrow, we're guaranteed the money. If the city doesn't come, they have to do a different type of analysis. So in a city like the City of Toronto, where they've actually got a new deal with the province that provides lending for affordable housing, the money is sitting there to go and get, but they have to go and ask. Right now, they're looking for money at reduced interest rates because we'll pay the going interest rate, and it's nuts. It's nuts. They are leaving all kinds of opportunities on the table, and they're causing far more suffering than needs to be the case. Because every time they sell, you see, they try to claim that when you sell land as market housing, that they're adding units to the marketplace. That's not true. The marketplace sells every unit it can. So if you provide public land for market housing, you're poaching units from the private land. So why not take that land and make it available to affordable housing instead of giving it to the private sector who doesn't need it? They've got there are 500,000 units worth of approved sites in the city of Toronto not being built. So they don't need a single square inch of public land, and yet we're giving away more public land to the market housing than we're putting into affordable housing. And all of that is crazy making. It's crazy making, except I like running. So when I get too crazy, I go for a run.
Okay, Esperanza's just put a question in the chat. Will there be any affordable rentals built for seniors in the downtown core?
Well, so first of all, it's important to know that the affordable housing guideline for rental is now $1,800 a month for a 1-bedroom. So when you're saying you want affordable rental housing for seniors downtown, you're saying you want housing at $1,800 a month or higher. I don't understand why we would do that to seniors. Secondly, if you used a model like ours to offer ownership to seniors, they'd have two choices. If they're getting rid of a house to move in, they pay cash for the unit, protect the equity from their house, and start paying $800 a month. If they didn't have that kind of equity, they would be eligible to carry that unit at about $1,400 a month. So who in their right mind will rent at $1,800 when they can own at $1,400? I don't understand. But the answer is not by me, because I don't do things that don't make sense. I haven't, it's true that seniors, as they get on, could use some help. But we can provide that through an ownership model. As I said, we provided 24-hour care in a regular condominium for people confined to wheelchairs. We can provide 24-hour care for seniors in a building if it's necessary through government programs. So there's no real reason is to put people into a rental position. And when you're talking $1,800 a month for a 1-bedroom, I'm not sure who you're helping. Please do a follow-up.
That 1,800 sounds very close to what the 60% of income would be. We have heard income-based plans before, and we're, as a group, we're trying to advocate for a different percentage depending on where you are in the income spectrum. So it could be anywhere from 30%, for really, really deep core housing need people. And then we can build it up. And it almost sounds like your system, although you don't seem to have fixed percentages.
Yeah, our system allows for that. We've set our base percentage at 32% of your income, which has always been the guideline for ownership. And the argument was always that part of ownership is you've got savings going on, so you can afford to pay a bit more. What happened is as ownership became a higher and higher income, incomes could only be, the owners could only be higher and higher incomes. They've now allowed as much as 39% of your income towards your mortgage. We're sticking to the 32%, but in all buildings, there are premium units and less premium units. And so what we've decided to do is if you want to be beyond the 20th floor, you're going to pay 34% of your income, not 32. So you're going to make a financial contribution to the balancing act in our buildings if you want a premium unit. So we are to some degree doing that within the context of serving lower income people. Now, anybody who doesn't take the extra help for their down payment, they can pay the 39% because now they're just buying in the market conditions. So there's a lot of flexibility in our buildings in terms of what we do.
Okay. And I'll once again open it up. And Esperanza has another,
Yes, and that's,
are there,
and the answer to that is yes and no. In other words, all we need is access to land with a patient landowner who is actually willing to sell to us, because we put in a bid on the bus station, a lovely bid. We offered to provide 800 units to nurses at the University Health Network. We offered to provide 400 units for ownership to students at the Metropolitan University at $800 a month for a small bachelor unit. We were turned down because we're not a billion-dollar corporation. So they turned down 1,400 units of affordable housing because we were a nonprofit. And I just shake my head. Now, the only reason we applied was to prove that they still weren't acting logically, you know. And of course, that site is in protracted negotiations with a developer, because a developer wants to maximize profits and the city wants to maximize their benefit. We would be under construction on that project almost by now if the city had been willing to work with us. So that project could have just as easily been for seniors, just as easily. So it's a function of this organization to identify where there is land where your influence can force the powers that be to allow that land to go to affordability. You know, so, and to some degree, we can go back to the old system where a developer wants a big project down in the waterfront, and you say, fine, but you set aside 25% of your land, we'll pay you fair value for it, but it's going to be affordable housing, and you're going to wait until construction starts. And if we go back to that system, which was around in the 80s, there would be thousands of units of affordable housing. When the government program ended, the city released 6,000 units worth of affordable housing land because they said there was no program, even though I'd already qualified under the official plan in the distillery district as qualifying for those lands. Because it was ownership, they walked away from 6,000 units. It's nuts. Anyways, sorry, I'm sure nuts is not an acceptable word. But Don is back. Don, what you got?
Don is back.
Hi. So I think that the reason why you're not getting more questions is that everybody is speechless, because it's such a you know, sort of a magic solution to our problems that people are just saying, well, it's not sinking in. So I hope that although you don't want to use the PowerPoint presentation, that it'll be made available so that, you know, maybe it'll sink in a little bit by reviewing that afterwards. And of course, we'll have the recording.
I will send it to Michael. Everybody who wants it will have to ask Michael, so that we actually know you want it, that we don't just send it to you otherwise. And then if you wish, we can have another session that people ask. But I found this works much better if I explain it in general, and then they try to suss it out from the PowerPoint. Yeah, right. And so I'm perfectly happy to have another session. You know, there is still land on Toronto Island for affordable housing. There's still land. We could do a seniors project on Toronto Island. You know, it just needs the right advocacy to the right people on the right basis. You know, I think it was 180 units.
I think that FoSTRA has to seriously consider, you know, supporting you more. So there you go.
Yeah. I'll accept any motion of FoSTRA at any time.
Okay, thanks. Bye-bye.
But yeah, the most important thing is when you run into a politician, say, how come the city isn't putting time into this? We don't, you know, I've actually gone and tried to argue that this is more of an economic development concern than a housing concern, and that they should have set aside 2 or 3 staff people in the economic development department to promote this, rather than putting more burden on the housing secretariat that is completely overloaded right now. So shifting it to another department. But of course, you know, everybody has their silo, and you start pulling things out of their silo, even if it's things they don't want to do, they get nervous. But you guys don't have to worry about silos. You just have to advocate.
Right. Great. Okay. Thank you very much. Excellent presentation. I know we've only seen the top of the iceberg, but maybe we'll have other sessions with you. Thank you very much, Michael.
Mhm.
For sure.
Okay. And we've got a few minutes left. Are there any other questions?
Yeah, if there's no other questions, I will repeat. It's land opportunities, and there are plenty of them downtown. Although as you go to Midtown, there's even more. But the entire waterfront is owned by government, you know, so there are thousands of units that could be done. And so the thing that's given me some comfort is that we are currently the only solution that I'm aware of in Canada. And that's been confirmed by Sean Fraser's deputy minister, who went across the country looking for solutions. And because we're the only solution, we just have to be patient and have people notice that we're the only solution. And that may mean another 30 RFPs that are unsuccessful until City Council gets frustrated with the lack of success. But for now, my focus and your help could be great around Lawrence Heights in particular, but anything else that's going on downtown. Unfortunately, I actually did put a bid in on Regent Park, promising 50% ownership to the tenants, and was blocked by the corporation because they didn't want their good tenants to become homeowners. So the time is well coming aboard where they can't just keep avoiding that issue. So, but there are other sites downtown. The city, it's on the city website, but you don't have to push and find sites. You have to go to your councillor and say, where is there land in your ward that we can do some housing on? Because they know all the sites.
Okay, thank you, Mike. And I'm not seeing any other hands. So I'm going to just say thank you very much. Oh, we have a new hand that's just come up. Thank you, Sil Grady. And we'll get you allowed.
We'll do the microphone dance and then we'll talk.
And we've got the camera. All right.
Okay.
There we have it.
Yep. Okay. Thank you. Hamish Wilson via Sil Grady. What about the land of the school parking lots as sites for all sorts of housing throughout the city, throughout the country, throughout the province? Would that be a possibility to access that at all, the parking lots?
Of course. The nice thing about land prices in downtown Toronto is they're worth more than a parking space because, of course, you have to replace the parking that you build on. But you can build parking for $60,000 to $80,000 a space, and you can build 4 to 5 units per parking space in an apartment building. Thus, you're only paying $20,000 a unit for the space, and the unit is worth $60,000 a unit. So yes, all of those are perfectly valid. There's been a number of redevelopments of schools in Toronto. There's a pretty famous one done with Tridel up at Eglinton and Yonge. And all of those could have been done by us because we pay fair value for the land. That was the trick. Up until 2 years ago, there was nobody offering to pay fair value for the land for affordable housing. And so that change is taking a while for people to absorb. But there's still surplus sites in downtown Toronto related to the school board that is possible to be developed, not just on their parking lots, but a parking lot is an obvious place to go. So each of you can plumb your knowledge as to what you know about land in your particular areas. You can talk to people who know more, and you come up with strategies. The Legion halls, all of them are struggling. All of them could be built into the base of an apartment building. Churches, same thing. You know, it's endless. LCBOs, you know, all these one-story structures on land with 20-story towers around them are all pretty straightforward to do in terms of what we're doing.
Thank you.
No worries.
Thank you. And I think Mississauga is looking at that with some of their large malls that they've got, and they're going to be taking down a mall and actually rebuilding the mall, but with all kinds of housing on it. I don't think it's the same sort of model that you've got, but it's that type of thing, so that you take a look, and it's could be school parking lots. It could be that some schools that I recall, because I was a school administrator, some schools I was in had a actual huge land. It was more than 3 times what the actual footprint of the school was, and you could just build housing on that. There's land that's all available, and it's just a matter of being creative with it. And we've just got 3 minutes left. So are there any other questions or comments that people would like to make?
Yeah, I'll just mention that our project at Albion and Islington is the redevelopment of a mall.
Oh, there you go.
So I should say plaza, though. It's not so much a mall, it's a plaza. But
A
yeah,
plaza.
those mediocre plazas, Midtown Toronto, they're all targets.
Mm-hmm.
But the owner has to
And a
decide.
lot. Yeah, and you have a good opportunity there for what do they call them? The TOCs, the transit-oriented communities.
Oh, of course. You see, if you guys wanted to focus on Parliament Front, right, there's a 30-story tower being planned there. It could all be affordable. That's actually, there's all the policy points towards affordable housing on those stations, but there needs to be political support from your MPP, from your MP, from your councillor, all saying that site should be affordable housing, until our friends at Metrolinx says, okay, let's go out and see what a nonprofit can offer us. You know, it's just they don't believe that a nonprofit can do it. And so if they hear from enough sources, so if you guys want to target a special place, that corner has plans on it already. And so if you want to get really specific about your affordable housing, that's the place to do it. That's the biggest bang for your buck.
Okay, thank you, Mike. And I'm going to just close off now and say thank you very much. This is an awful lot for us to wrap our heads around. It's not the type of information that we're used to getting and saying that this is going to work. And I'm looking very forward to reading more about it, getting your PowerPoint, and anyone that would like, I'll send out a notice to everybody that had registered for the meeting and say, just respond to me and I will send you the PowerPoint, and we'll have all that in links available. So thank you very much, Mike. This was a fabulous, eye-opening presentation, and what a change to look at somebody without having to stare at a PowerPoint. It was really enjoyable.
If you look at the chat, anybody who has asked for the PowerPoint there, you should make note of it so they don't have to ask you again.
Yeah, I'll send it off to them. Okay. Perfect.
Perfect. And thanks, guys. I enjoyed it. I look forward to talking to you more.
Okay. Thank you, Mike. And
Bye
good
now.
night, everyone. Have a good evening.